Last hour, we had a caller who wanted to have a pie-to-the-face bet with any of the Danettes. He said that Notre Dame is going undefeated and winning the national championship. Well, all four Danettes held up their hand. They're going to go against that bet, that Notre Dame will not go undefeated and win the national championship. We start there with Andy Staples, one of the great college football reporters in America. He works for On3 Sports. Let's look at Notre Dame's schedule. Paulie, give me the schedule here with Notre Dame.
It's a saucy Miami. They are at, for Notre Dame, they're at Miami, host Texas A&M, host Purdue, at Arkansas to start.
Okay. You think Notre Dame can go undefeated, Andy?
Paulie strikes me as a blueberry guy, maybe one of those lattice work apple pie guys. I mean, I really, you guys do need to start thinking about the pie that you would like to get in the face.
Wow.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's possible. It is possible they can go 12-0. Winning the national title is a bit harder because you got to get through that entire tournament. But hell, they got to the national title game last year.
Wait, Andy, are you willing to take a pie to the face if Notre Dame doesn't go undefeated?
Yeah, I'll take a pie to the face because it means I get to eat pie.
Andy!
There we go. You let me know when I need to do it. Because look, a Northern Illinois game can happen to you. And they could go to Miami and lose week 1. But this is one of those seasons that just feels like we don't know anything. But Notre Dame feels like one of the surer things, which is interesting because they are breaking in a new starting quarterback, and we don't really know how that's going to look. But we do know they're going to have one of the best offensive lines in college football. Jeremiah Love is probably the best back in college football. And I think the receivers, you're going to see them. Jaden Greathouse, you saw toward the end of the playoff, like really step up. So I do think you're going to see a more dynamic version of the Notre Dame offense, even though you got a new quarterback, probably C.J. Carr.
You point out that 6 of the 8 betting favorites to win the national championship are going to break in new starting quarterbacks. Texas is technically breaking in a new quarterback, but it's a well-known quarterback. Handicap, these teams who are, and the new quarterbacks we should be aware of.
So the new guys, Arch Manning is the one probably who has the most experience. So of those 6 teams, so that's Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oregon, Alabama. Arch has quite a bit of experience. Oregon's starting quarterback Dante Moore had some experience as UCLA started a couple of years ago. But Arch probably has been the most ready for this. And it's interesting because if Arch comes in and they're significantly more dynamic offensively than they were last year, you're going to get those retroactive questions of Steve Sarkisian. Why didn't you start Arch over Quinn Ewers earlier? But I'm fascinated to see what he looks like because I think people who just see the last name, they're thinking, oh, this guy is going to look like Peyton or Eli. He is not. Arch is a dual-threat quarterback. His dad, Cooper, was a wide receiver who would have been a good wide receiver at Ole Miss had he not had a neck injury. So this is an athlete who actually has a very good arm. And so Arch's threat to run makes Texas a very different team to defend than Quinn Ewers' Texas from last year. And we'll get a good look at it week 1 against Ohio State because Ohio State's going to be breaking in 9 new defensive starters.
The other quarterbacks, though, Ohio State, do they know who their quarterback is?
It's probably Julian Sayin, who is a guy who originally signed with Alabama. He's from California. When Nick Saban retired, Julian Sayin hopped in the transfer portal and wound up at Ohio State. He was the understudy last year to Will Howard. So the thought is that it's going to be him. And really, if you're throwing to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis, it's probably going to go pretty well. And Jeremiah Smith is just a freak of nature. He's the best player in college football this year. I don't know if he's going to win the Heisman Trophy, but he is the best player. He could enter if there was a supplemental draft tomorrow, every team in the NFL would give up everything it could get him.
If I gave you the top 3 teams in the initial rankings or everybody else to win the national championship?
Everybody else.
Yeah.
There's more variability this year, I feel like. The quarterback thing's a big reason for it. I look at the coaches poll, and I've noticed this. So the coaches poll came out this week. We had my colleague Brett McMurphy on, who has an AP vote, and he revealed his AP poll ballot. I've done some way too early top 25s. everybody's top 8 feels like it's the same. And everybody says, well, I think any of these teams can win the national title. And I would agree. I like Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Notre Dame, Clemson, Oregon, Alabama. In whatever order you want, you could make a very compelling case to me right now that those could be the national champs. I have a hard time with anybody else. But I also know we saw Indiana last year. I don't know that anybody would predicted Notre Dame going as far as they did last year. There's going to be a couple others that pop up.
Talking to Andy Staples, covers college football for On3 Sports. Is there an SMU, Arizona State, Indiana, maybe we would consider overachiever who could be in the national title picture or the playoffs?
Well, the Indiana thing's interesting because usually when a team has a big turnaround, has a huge season, and they're not typically a successful program, they just sort of go back. Indiana didn't lose anybody but the quarterback, Curtis Rourke. And then they went out and got Fernando Mendoza from Cal, who's a guy that Georgia wanted and a bunch of other, big-time programs wanted to get as a transfer. So Indiana could still be just as good as it was last year. Now, the schedule is probably going to be harder than it was last year, but you've also got Illinois that won 10 games last year, brought a ton of guys back. In the Big 12, Arizona State, we predicted them last year. They won the thing. They've got Sam Leavitt back at QB, so everybody's expecting big things from them. But I say watch Utah in the Big 12. They had a terrible season last year because of quarterback issues. They went out and got a guy named Devin Dampier from New Mexico, who's more of a runner than a thrower. But when you have an offensive line like Utah's, that's just fine.
Give me the coaches that are under more pressure than anybody else.
It's a crazy situation in the SEC because you have Billy Napier at Florida, Hugh Freeze at Auburn, Brent Venables at Oklahoma. All of them should have better teams than they had last year. All of them probably have rosters capable of competing for playoff berths, but there's the Oklahoma and Florida situations, the schedules are so hard that if things go wrong, they could wind up 6-6 and you could see the whole staff get fired. For Auburn, they have the roster. They just didn't have the quarterback play last year. Like, they were bad last year because they had essentially this Groundhog Day thing where they'd have a crippling interception late in the game. And Hugh Freeze didn't manage his quarterbacks very well. He was throwing them under the bus publicly. If they get even average quarterback play, that's a team that compete for a playoff berth. But if this roster goes 6-6, you're making a change probably.
What about USC?
It's a great question, Dan. When you hear Lincoln Riley talk, it sounds like he is pointing toward 2026. They have this massive recruiting class coming in 2026. And I think if you ask USC fans when Lincoln Riley got hired, if in year 4 they'd be pointing toward the following year, it's not what they wanted. But that they don't seem particularly excited about their chances in the Big Ten this year. I do think they're very excited about Husan Longstreet, their freshman quarterback, but I don't know that Lincoln Riley's ready to throw him into the fire yet. It sounds like they're going to still go with Jaden Mayava. So this is a team that, it's not been built up in the trenches the way it should have been since Lincoln Riley got there. It seems like in recruiting they are trying to do that now, but I just don't know that it's not ready for this season yet. And so I think they're probably looking at a average to above average season in the Big Ten, which is not what you're paying $10 million a year for.
Yeah, man, they're patient. Far more patient.
They are patient.
But it's because of that contract, I'm guessing.
That's a big reason. There's a lot of too expensive to fire coaches right now. That under pressure list could have been a lot longer, but Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, Mark Stoops at Kentucky, Lincoln Riley at USC, like, you're not firing them. You are not raising that much money and firing them. It's just not worth it.
Great to talk to you as always, Andy. Thank you for joining us.